It's time we all talked about a serious problem in Monster Hunter World. The problem? A lack of Zinogre. There's so many monsters with so little time, so little space in this game, it's honestly a big crime. Look at all these environments and all these cool places, we have a serious lack of seriously cool faces. These new monsters are fantastic, the movesets are nice, but I wouldn't mind a few monsters returning in the Iceborne expansion, especially ones with lots of bugs, ones who act like lightning rods and who would make for painful hugs. If you're a fan of spiky wolves and you love when shocking events ensue, then you should bow down to this Lord of Thunder, listen to his awoo! So without further ado, and with plenty of time to savor it, let's talk about a monster who's surely a fan favorite. Hello there.
General Kenobi.
Sorry, I wanted to try something different today. Ladies and gentlemen, with the Iceborne beta officially come to an end, we've now not only seen and experienced the new monsters, but even more so, the returning ones. And I would be lying to you all if I said I wasn't impressed. Obviously, my opinion isn't fact, and I know that some people disagree with me, but I think New World Tigrex was done pretty well, and New World Nargacuga is just absolutely fantastic. With that in mind, I am more and more open these days to having returning monsters instead of new monsters. Not that I wouldn't always still rather than new, but a well-done returning monster could be just fantastic. And one that could be particularly well done is my furry boy over here, Zinogre. So let's talk about why Zinogre should come to the new world and how it should be done. As for why Zinogre is an easy pick to bring to the new world, the first reason being somewhat obvious is that he was at one point a flagship, and every returning monster so far announced for Iceborne has also been a flagship at one point or another. Maybe this streak of returning flagships is a fluke, a coincidence, but maybe it isn't. The second reason why to bring him is giant and glaring, and it is his popularity. Zinogre is easily one of the most beloved monsters in the entire series, part of which being because he is essentially a dog and because people like dogs. But even more so than that is his uniqueness. Zinogre is a thunder wyvern, and that is about where similarities with other monsters end. He is spiky as fuck, which for some people is a bad thing. I'm sort of impartial to spikes. In this case, I think that while there may be a few too many spikes, they still look good. He's acrobatic as hell, with some of his moves essentially having him turn into a luchador monster.
Nacha!
He absorbs power directly from the thunder bugs in his fur, which is not only awesome lore-wise, but also makes his fight have these really neat damage break sections that are really quirky and unusual. On top of this, the thunderbug absorption actually makes him one of the most approachable monsters from a lore perspective as well. The majority of the creatures in the Monster Hunter universe and their abilities and attacks can all be explained through their lore. However, if an average person didn't look up this lore, they'd probably think it's just justified by, hey, it's a video game. Zinogre is one of the biggest exceptions to this, as the way his abilities work is such an inherent part of his fight that you would have to be trying not to notice it. Zinogre's armor has always looked fantastic in the past, like not just good, but fantastic. And the big one for me, his monster classification is unique, or at least it was before Monster Hunter World was released. Zinogre was the first of the fanged wyverns, and is in fact the only fanged wyvern that exists at all in the old world. To me, this reason alone is as good a reason as any to bring him into world. It's a grandpappy of the fanged wyvern classification, and in my mind a distant relation of Tobi Kadachi. Zinogre should get to watch Jagras and Juros and Dodo and Odo and all the other fanged wyverns wandering around enjoying themselves. And honestly, it just feels weird to me to have every single fanged wyvern in the series of Monster Hunter World, except for one. Literally one. Well, except his subspecies, the Stygian Zinogre, and his deviant Thunderlord Zinogre, both of which, by the way, I'd also be happy to see. Thunderlord is a far cry from likelihood, as the chances of deviants being involved in Monster Hunter World are incredibly low. But if regular Zinogre comes in, I would say chances are decent of a Stygian Zinogre. Stygian uses Dracophage bugs instead of Thunder bugs, which allows him to attain a higher maximum power level.
It's over 9,000!
These Dracophage bugs also make him look significantly cooler, at least from my perspective, as the color scheme is simply one of my favorites, and put on a monster as cool as this with effects as crazy as his, it just makes me love him even more. And of course, the bugs also help him to survive both in extreme heat and cold, which are environments that do exist in the new world, one of which being new and Iceborne. So hey, anything's possible, right? Anything, including even potentially a different Zinogre subspecies. Zinogre gains all of his elemental power through symbiosis with various bugs. So what is to stop him from merging with a different species in the new world? What is stopping Zinogre from getting down with the flash flies? I might go into further detail on this in a future video, but for now, just imagine a Zinogre based around flashes instead of a specific element, flipping through the air and attempting to blind you while he spins over your head. Honestly, I really want to see that happen, and hey, it could happen. And even though I would never lobby for this personally, you could arguably put in a new subspecies of an old monster without even including the base old monster, especially when you consider that Zinogre's skeleton is already in the game.
What? When did this happen?
Zinogre actually shares a skeleton uniquely with Behemoth. The only really time-intensive change that would take would be the tail, as it's very different from Behemoth. That puts him miles ahead of most other monsters in terms of chances of coming to world, ahead of things like Nibblesnarf or unusual shapes like Gore Magala, and even a fair bit ahead of any Leviathan. As while that skeleton was being worked on, it just wasn't working, at least the last time Capcom talked to us about it. On top of these reasons, Zinogre is also a beautiful monster with beautiful animations and a beautiful fight as a whole, and that is in the old world. Imagine Zinogre in the new world, not just the new fur textures that would probably resemble Boundburrow's tail, or the extra detail on the scales and the spiky bits, but the fight itself, with all of its awesome thunder animations, and even his charge ability itself would probably look gorgeous with all the bugs flowing into him if he just got that classic Monster Hunter World graphical upgrade. One of the other main reasons I think Zinogre should be in the game is that he is an Apex level predator, meaning the only monsters he really fears are other Apex monsters and Elder Dragons, barring a couple of exceptions, of course. That means that no matter what role he may or may not have in the story, he should always stay relevant in the endgame of Iceborne if he were brought in. He would be a tier 2 in the current tempered system. Even 1,000 hours into Monster Hunter World as a base game, I was hunting down Odogorons and Lyciana, so there is no reason to think that a monster on a similar power level to them wouldn't get the same treatment, which is great, because if someone told me that I could only fight 20 monsters from all of Monster Hunter for the rest of my life, Zinogre would absolutely be on that list. If you want to talk about how Zinogre should come to the new world, then that actually takes a bit more conversation than most other monsters. No, it's not like that, actually. I think his base attacks as a whole are really solid, like almost perfect. For his actual moveset itself, I don't think I would remove anything. But there are some glaring issues that do need to be resolved. First up, his ow! Occasionally Zinogre will straight up pause the fight and enter a charge up mode where he just sort of stops and sits still and absorbs thunderbugs and their energy, and apparently when he does that he has to sit still in a particularly vulnerable position and just howl at the stars. This is, however, such an integral part of the Zinogre experience that I would never in a million years suggest removing it. Changing it a little, however, might just be warranted. I'm not asking for anything crazy, just add a little bit of danger to the experience. During this move, Zinogre is completely vulnerable, and you can break him out of it by flinching him. If you don't flinch him, then he charges up faster and unlocks his stronger abilities sooner, so even if you didn't care about the general damage that this period allows you, you'd still care about it stopping the charge of this canine catastrophe. My main request for a change to this ability would be to add an element of danger to it. He's absorbing thunderbugs. Maybe the thunderbugs could provide tiny shocks to semi-predictable locations. I'm not trying to remove the part of this charging state that lets you damage him. I just want there to be a slight layer more than just Hunter hit monster as hard as possible in as little time as possible with no interruption. It's like hitting the post in the training room for a few seconds. It's like getting a knockdown on a monster, but without the satisfaction of knowing that you caused the knockdown.
I didn't do it.
Aside from that move, I have nothing that I want to change on an individual level, at least. However, there are a couple of overall things that I would like to talk about. First is how acrobatic he is. Zinogre has some of the most unique animations in the entire series, all the way down to him having a sort of shoulder bash instead of a classic hip check just at the basis level, all the way up to him doing flips and spins and stuff that's crazy. This is most exemplified by these, some of which are absolutely 100% perfect, like the one where he lands on his back and has to sit there for a second, but some, like the little ball shoot flip combo into another ball shoot, could at least look a little better. I don't mean changing the mechanics of the attack, and I don't mean the visual fidelity of the thunderballs either. I mean making his spins and jumps actually anchor to things. Think about monsters like Odogoron and Tobi-Kadachi in World. They're both extremely agile. Zinogre may not be quite as fast as these monsters, but he is absolutely as agile as them, and arguably even more acrobatic. The only reason anyone could even argue otherwise is because Zinogre isn't in World, and therefore doesn't jump on the walls, and he doesn't have these good-looking animation flips He just sort of does these weird things that look a little out of place in the old world, honestly. But if Zinogre came to the new world, he would definitely be able to jump on the walls and it would make him feel correct, at least to me. It would mess up the predictability of some of the patterns on some attacks, but it would absolutely make the fight feel better, which is the most important thing in not just Monster Hunter, but video games as a whole. Speaking of the patterns and such, that is one thing I'm unsure of for World. The patterns are important, and in fact, the fact that Zinogre has properly learnable patterns is one of my favorite things about his fight, as I absolutely love monsters that genuinely reward you for learning their fight, and he is one of them. He's one of the best. But Zinogre's lightning-based patterns in particular might be in for a bit of a change if he comes to World. Zinogre's control over the Thunder element is arguably more intense than any other World monster's control over elements, barring Kirin itself. I'm not implying that he is the most powerful, not by a long shot. He simply has good control of his element, to the point that he can curve thunder balls. Which, while cool, might struggle to fit into the general theme of realism in World. Personally, I don't want them to change. I love them the way they are, and they are a significant part of Zinogre's identity as a monster. The only other thing I wish I could change is Thunder Debuff. I hate being stunned. It's just the worst experience. Nobody enjoys being stunned. This, however, is never going to change, so I guess I should just continue crying in a corner with stars circling over my head. In summary, then, Zinogre is one of the best boys. His furriness is the stuff of legends, as is his control of the elements. His skeleton is already in World. Every other monster of his classification is already in World. He can make a home in our existing environments relatively easily, and brought to World, he would likely be one of the best looking monsters in the entire game, at least in my personal opinion. Not to mention that he would still be relevant at the end game, which is always a massive plus. I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this fine gentleman over here has been Zinogre. Let me know in the comments what you think about my changes, what changes you would make, and in fact, what monsters as a whole would you like to see come back in Iceborne. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters, or important news about the Kingdom Animalia. Rage, Continent, Hollow, we're all here, talking about the things you want to hear. So if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons, even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros. There's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.